What's up, guys? It's your boy Drucifer on Xbox Live. But wait a minute, Xbox Live is gone, and it's Game Pass now. Wait another minute, the title of this video says God of War on PC. God of War isn't an Xbox title, and Xbox isn't a PC. Well, that's right, boys. I made the switch. I went to the dark side. I have joined the ranks of hashtag PC Master Race. We'll get more into that as we go. We got a lot of content here with no sound. More on that to come. So I got to step up and fill in the gaps, because who wants to watch a silent movie, you know? For context, for people who are just joining the party, I used to always open my videos with "This is Drew on Xbox Live," because I thought that was cool for some reason. It's not, and it's irrelevant anymore because I'm not on Xbox. But anyway, the no sound business is my bad, and I'll get more into that as we go. But for now, I just want to welcome anyone new to the channel and give an update to people who've been around for a while. I've been pretty on and off with YouTube, more off than on. A lot of that's been scheduling, but it also was just a pain in the butt to produce content on a console. Seriously, props to anyone who does that every day. It's cumbersome. You got to connect, you got to get a USB capture device to daisy chain to your HDMI output for your console. You got to connect a capture device to a laptop or a PC. You got to make sure your stream's solid and doesn't degrade by the time you get to your final video product. It's a lot of hassle. And then you either got to edit the video on your computer you captured it to, or transfer it to another computer to edit, which is what I was doing. I was capturing to a laptop and then doing all my final edits on my Mac with Premiere Pro. And it's just not worth all the extra hassle, in my opinion. But a while back, I posted an update saying that I was going to try and get back to a semi-regular content schedule. But one of the hurdles that I was trying to get over was a better production setup. We're getting there now. I built my own PC, and it's good enough that I can capture directly to OBS and edit and upload all from the same machine. It hasn't been perfect, but we're getting there. You know, it's all new to me. And it's all user error. I'm just trying to get a handle on how it all works. I've never really used OBS with any regularity before, so that's been a learning experience. Almost all the God of War content I have to date has been uploaded 1080p, even though I'm playing and capturing in 1440. But that's been corrected, as you've already seen. More recent videos that have been uploaded are available in 1440. So as I get more time with the programs, it will get better. There have been other snags along the way. After I thought I fixed it, the last time I was trying to mess with OBS and my mic and whatnot, I must have inadvertently and unknowingly messed something else up in OBS, because I do have later content that I now have to record additional audio for, because at some point the audio just stopped again, and it corresponds with roughly the last time I was trying to mess with Audacity, so I think that's what happened. So anyway, there's going to be more content later on that I'm going to have to fill in like this, just because I'm still learning all this stuff. And it seems like every time I get OBS figured out, something completely unrelated to OBS messes up OBS, and then I have to figure it out after I've recorded hours of footage and try and fix it. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Need to try and stick with the timeline. There's no need to rush. I've got to do this for an hour and 45 minutes to fill in all the content for this block of content. As my long timers know, up until this series, I've recorded all my content on my channel from some kind of Xbox. First it was a 360, then the One, then a couple things from Series X. Then that's when I said I needed to figure out a way to up my production quality. There's been some steps forward, a couple steps back, but like I said, we're getting there. Big thing right now is figuring out my audio setup, but my hand got kind of forced here with OBS acting up, so here we are. I've never really been one for console wars. To me, they're juvenile. They really only serve to up the egos of people who are bound to one way to play their games and consume their content. They all have their pros and cons, but for me, I was committed to the Xbox for a long time. The price of the PS3 in the early days really hurt, and I was there for the first two PlayStations, But man, if it wasn't for the price point on that PS3, man, if it wasn't a choice between groceries and rent or a PlayStation, I probably would have stuck with PlayStation. But as it was at the time, I could get an Xbox bundle with a top-of-the-line 360 and some games and accessories for $400 out the door instead of $600 just to get me started. These days, I'm a much more fortunate person than I was back then. So my wife and I, we have the privilege of having every type of console, modern console in the house. PlayStation 5, Series X, Nintendo Switch, yada yada, Steam Deck. But we both prefer to play on PC, and that got kicked off by the Steam Deck, actually. Pardon. I've had a Steam account since like 2012. I signed up for it back in college, but it just sat there and did nothing because I never had a good enough machine to make it worth actually playing my games that way. And then Valve announced the Steam Deck, and that got me excited. And because it was a portable console-like experience that allowed players to play PC games. So I immediately signed up for the reservation queue because these things were so hot when they first hit the market. Valve wasn't even going to have enough units available to meet the demand, so you had to sign up for a placeholder in line to get a new one when they had them to give. So to hold myself over while I was waiting because the PC bug had hit me, I got an Alienware laptop to hold me over until I got the deck. And folks, if you've never played on PC and don't know about Steam, you got to check them out. It's ridiculous how many sales they have throughout the year and how cheap you can get games if you time it right. I filled my Steam backlog with sales from Steam and Humble Bundle deals so fast that I have a library that equals, if not rivals, my Xbox collection in a fraction of the time it took me to accumulate it. So when people want to make jokes about why wait 2 years to play a game on PC when you can play it on PlayStation now, it's a dead argument on its merits alone. I have a backlog of 200 or more games. I can wait 2 years, y'all, for a new game, trust me. I got plenty to do. I might not want to wait, but I absolutely can. And if I want to play it badly enough that I don't want to wait, I have a PS5 and I can play it there. But I'd rather wait because I enjoy the PC experience so much more. In fact, I have yet to choose PS5 over PC, even though I do have a PSN account, because Sony requires it to play their games, even on PC, which to me is weird. That's been a big controversy lately, with GOWR requiring a PSN account, the Horizon Zero Dawn remaster requiring a PSN account. There was that whole fiasco with Helldivers, which they reversed, although they seem to have not reversed their stance on either of the other games. I don't know. But another thing I love about PC is there's no upsells. Well, what do you mean by upsells? Well, when you buy a console, you're really only getting one piece of the puzzle. You need games, peripherals, service subscriptions, etc. Yes, you still need a monitor, and mouse, and keyboard or controller if that's your preference, and you still need to buy games, etc. But the subscription model, that's the ripoff. And I get it. Consoles are manufactured and sold at a loss, so console manufacturers require those extra add-ons to make up for the loss on the system they're trying to actually generate a profit. I get that. But on PC, I already pay for my internet, which gives me access to online play, YouTube, Netflix, whatever. But on a console, you have to pay a premium to essentially utilize the internet you already pay for. If you want to watch Netflix, you need a subscription to the console's online service. What about YouTube? Subscription. What about just to sign on to play games with friends? You guessed it, there's a subscription for that. Yet I can play the same games online with the same dedicated servers with all of my friends on Steam, and there is no upfront cost other than the cost of the game itself. Amazing. So that makes it really hard for me to justify spending on console extras. In fact, my wife and I canceled all of our subscriptions earlier this year. Our gaming subscriptions, that is. You know, my wife canceled her PSN. I canceled Game Pass. The only one left is Nintendo Online. But that's going too, because these days our Switch is only really used to play Zelda games, and that's it. The rest of it we do on PC. My wife even started using my laptop more for when she doesn't want to game on her Steam Deck, because I only use the laptop when I absolutely need a Windows machine. And I did struggle for a bit with Game Pass, because that's how deeply ingrained the idea of needing a service is in the minds of the gamer these days. I was paying for Game Pass Ultimate for a long time, even when I was only playing on console, which seemed kind of silly since Ultimate covers PC too. But I was mostly doing it for the other perks that it came with. But when I got my laptop, that incentivized me to try and squeeze more value out of the subscription. So I even used Microsoft's instructions on their website to set up Edge on my Steam Deck to act as a Game Pass app so that I could use cloud gaming to play Xbox games on my Steam Deck. I really convinced myself it was worth the $200 a year to play a handful of cloud games on my Steam Deck. So for a while there, I was trying to convince myself to at least downgrade to PC Game Pass because I wasn't using my console at all, and I wasn't using the cloud gaming feature enough to justify paying for that. PC Game Pass did help me dodge a bullet with Starfield, which I dropped after about 20 hours because I was bored as hell, and I would have been hella pissed, honestly, to reach the end of the story just to find out all the hours I spent on side shit and crafting was wasted. Because none of that carries over to New Game Plus. None of it. Nada. Spoilers. I've never seen a game in my life before where New Game Plus actually does the opposite and wipes all your gains instead of carrying them over to the next playthrough. What is the purpose of a New Game Plus at that point? It's just a new game. Sorry, I'm getting carried away. Ultimately, I never even bothered downgrading to PC Game Pass and just dropped it altogether. Because while it may not have helped me with a game, while it may have helped me with a game like Starfield, Steam has a pretty robust refund policy. And as long as you have not played that game for more than 2 hours and you bought that game within the last 14 days, you can get your money back. And everything that is in Xbox's catalog is on Steam, so there really is no need to have both. And if you're patient enough, you can usually get the games heavily discounted through one of Steam's many sales. One easy example that I see all the time is Halo Master Chief Collection. I see it go on sales all the time on Steam. I've seen it around $10. Yeah, I would have eaten the refund money on Starfield with Steam after 20 hours. But if I knew that the only fail-safe I had was the Steam refund policy, I would have been much quicker in making my judgment as to whether or not that game was worth my time. I was really only... Sorry, hold on. Sorry about that. I was really only holding on as long as I was because I knew I had the benefit of the fact that I hadn't actually paid for the game and I was playing it entirely through Game Pass. If I had not had that safety net, I would not have given it as much time as I did. Shortly after dropping Game Pass, the rest of the game subscriptions fell. So it was Game Pass went first, then PSN, and then so on and so forth. I have a free PSN account. I don't have a paid one. So for me, at the end of the day, PC is the way to play. But that's my personal preference. And it's everyone's personal preference. I'm not better or worse than you because I choose to play my games in a different manner than you do. We are all gamers, and we should just embrace it. After deciding PC was the way for me, I eventually did the most PC thing to ever come to PC, and I built my own desktop rig. The laptop's cool, the deck is great for portability, but when I'm at home, I want the biggest, beefiest, mightiest rig I can have, and desktop is the way to do it. And building a PC is not only a great learning experience, but it's actually fun. And at the end of the day, when you have to diagnose a hardware issue, who's better prepped with knowledge on how that system's put together than the person who put it together? And you can save a little in the end by not paying the labor markup for buying a pre-built. And you can save even more if you plan it right and wait for the right kind of sales to get parts heavily discounted. You can buy some parts used if that's your thing. I bought all mine new. I don't do the used thing, but I hear plenty of stories of people building perfectly good computers with certain secondhand parts. Some parts you don't want to go secondhand on. I don't care. But yeah, so I mean, there's different ways that you can cut the prices down. But like I said, I wasn't worried about sales personally when I built mine because I was not worried about the cost as much as I was the quality. And I have that privilege. Some people don't. But I'm not here to put anyone down or make myself look better or whatever. So let's talk specs, because I've already had people ask about the build, and I have shared Steam system info in the comments before, but I know people want to know what's under the hood, so to speak. I'm not going to do any cuts away from this video because I don't want to take away from the experience of the game. The only reason I'm even here talking to you is because of an audio issue that I plan to go into more later in the conversation, but that's already been resolved in future content. Episode 20 will be the last one with no game audio, and game audio will resume with episode 21. But I will maybe do a different video later that goes more behind the scenes into my setup and some of the other stuff. But right now I want to just talk system specs. I'm just going to run through the list of parts, and we can talk more about the whole assembly in depth later, because I do want to get on the topic of what's up with OBS and such that I alluded to earlier. But we're going to start with the GPU, then the CPU, and we'll take it from there. I went with AMD. You'll know more about why as we go. But for the GPU, we are using AMD's Radeon RX 7900 XTX, which has 24 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM, is capable of 4K and ray tracing and what they call anti-lag, but I don't have access to the proprietary software AMD uses for that, so I've never played with the anti-lag. It all is Windows proprietary software, and if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm not using Windows, as I've constantly referred to Windows, not constantly, but a couple times throughout this video referred to Windows as an entity separate from my own setup, and that's because I'm not using Windows, but more on that to come. Let's see here. And I do have rebar enabled, so my GPU is running at full throttle. It's a beefy card. It would run equivalent to a 4080 or 4080 Super for reference, but it's not going to contend with a 4090. Nothing is going to contend with the 4090. For the CPU, I went with a Ryzen 9 7900X. And that's 12 cores, 24 threads, and it's unlocked, which makes it available to overclock. Now, the best CPU on the market for pure gaming is the Ryzen 7 7800 X3D, and I could have gotten that one for a few dollars more than the one I went with, but I chose cores over Vcache because I'm also toying around with VMs and other production stuff, and I wanted the extra cores to pass along. And honestly, nowadays, that 7800 X3D might not necessarily be the big bad boy it has been all this time, and I only say that because recently system specs came out for Civilization 7, and if you want to play 4K 60, you need a 16-core CPU, and the 7800 X3D is only 8 cores. So, there you are. But, again, I digress. For RAM, I went with 64 gigs of Kingston Fury Renegade DDR5 memory. It's got a CL32, 6400 megahertz. I'm overclocking that with DOCP because I'm on an Asus motherboard, which doesn't use XMP or Expo, so it's DOCP for whatever reason. The board is a Rogue Strix B650A gaming motherboard with Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth. It's got 3 M.2 slots. It's compatible with all AMD 7000 series CPUs. It's AM5, and it supports up to 128 gigs of DDR5 RAM at 6400 megahertz. The cooler is a Corsair IQ all-in-one with a 360 millimeter radiator. The case is a SAMA PC case. It has 2 intake fans, 1 exhaust fan. And the power supply is a Corsair RM1000E, fully modular 1000 watt power supply rated at 80 plus gold. For the operating system, I went with Linux. Yeah, I had to be that guy. But I do not use Arch, by the way. I'm not an Arch bro. Nothing against Arch, just not where I'm at right now. But really, the Steam Deck taught me a lot about the viability of gaming on a Linux system. It runs on a proprietary distribution that Valve built by using Arch Linux as its base. So I guess in that way I am an Arch bro, because I do use Steam Deck, although it's a deprecated Arch. And nobody on Arch, on Reddit, considers it part of Arch. But anyway, I digress. I heard recently Valve actually struck a huge partnership with Arch to fund their research and operations in building and maintaining Arch Linux, which is actually pretty cool. Enterprise Linux is a good thing because it gets a wider public reach. More people should be aware of Linux and what it can do and how easily you can make the switch. I won't go into huge Linux lecture right now, and I am not an Arch bro, but I looked into Arch, and to set it up proper is a bit more advanced than I'm prepared to attempt as of right now. But there are thousands of versions of Linux, and more than a few are designed to help people transition over from other systems to Linux, and there are more advanced versions of the system for power users. So maybe in that later video focusing on my system, I'll delve more into it, but I didn't want to get too distracted. If you didn't already know, Linux and AMD have kind of always meshed together, and that's why I chose AMD. AMD drivers are built right into the Linux kernel, so it makes it a sort of set it and forget it situation. And for the folks out there who are like, oh, but if Linux is so great, why doesn't more people use it? As a desktop, it might not get as much usage as like Windows or Mac or whatever. Like the global market for PC desktop for Linux is like 4.5%, which, don't get me wrong, is fantastic. Like a year before that number was generated, it was like 3 something. So it's growing. But where Linux really shines, and where most people don't realize Linux shines, is the World Wide Web. The majority of the internet runs on Linux servers and Linux services. Your Wi-Fi router runs on Linux. The power grid that keeps the lights running in your city, in your state, run on Linux. So Linux is much more important than people realize or give it credit for. But this isn't a why is Linux cool video. This is a God of War video. So I went with Linux, with Nobara Linux as my system of choice. It is a custom distribution that uses Fedora code and repositories, along with some custom repositories and other technical junk. It is not a Fedora spin. It is not a Fedora-like. It does not even use all of the same repositories Fedora does. It just happens to use Fedora code and some Fedora repositories. I only feel the need to point that out because there are a lot of people that go on to Nobara and treat it like Fedora, and it creates problems. It's not Fedora. It's not. But again, I like Nobara because it's a custom distribution and it is set up for video gaming and content creation right out of the box. Now, any Linux distribution can be set up to do any kind of purpose because Linux is a do-it-yourself type deal. Like, you can get a basic setup out of the box, and then from there you tweak it to do whatever you want it to do. So literally any distribution can play games. I just like Nobara because it's already set up out of the box. I don't have to do a bunch of extra crap. It already was set up for OBS. It already was set up for Steam. And that's why I chose it. And it's made to be usable entirely from the graphical interface. So if you're not a Linux power user, you're not comfortable with the Linux terminal, you can get by in Nobara without the terminal to an extent. Everyone who uses Linux should at some point learn the terminal because you do need it. But Nobara makes it so that you can get by without it for the most part. Fedora is another enterprise Linux sponsored by Red Hat. And I already had Like I said, I already had Steam and OBS and other stuff ready to go. I only had to download my video editor and Audacity to get set up. That's it. Like, it didn't have Kdenlive, it didn't have Audacity, but everything else was ready to go. But what is cool about Linux is it's all open source, so there's a lot of free resources available to you just for using the system. Last thing I will say about Linux is it might be a nobody in the desktop space as far as... Oh, I already mentioned that stuff. Never mind. I'm kind of deviating from my script a little bit. Anyway. But I've been doing good with the system. It's smooth, it's easy to understand and use. I'm still learning the ropes though with stuff like OBS and Kdenlive, my video editor. The editor has a similar GUI or GUI to Premiere Pro, so that makes getting used to it a little easier. For a while there, I wasn't editing videos in 1440. The default was 1080, so a lot of videos for the series were rendered 1080. But I got a handle on that. So you're already seeing content on the channel available in 1440, like I mentioned earlier. But the other thing I was trying to tackle was echo in the audio. And I ended up cutting off OBS's access to audio altogether in my effort to correct that, because I found out it was recording multiple audio channels. And anyway, so basically at some point I accidentally started piping all the audio directly to my headphones and away from OBS, so I was still hearing audio as I was playing the game and recording, but I did at no point stop to check in the middle of recording or even early on in the first couple minutes of recording to see if there were any issues, because I wasn't expecting there to be any issues. But unfortunately I recorded a lot of footage with no audio without realizing it. The edited content's going to be split into 3 videos on YouTube, but the total playtime between them is 1 hour and 45 minutes, and that's just what I left in. I cut out almost as much as I left in. So I had something like 3 or 4 hours of video that had no audio, and I feel like a jackass, but like I said, we're getting there. And let's see here. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch myself up where I'm in my script. Yeah. Let's see here. Here we go. Yeah, so I figured that out, got it all corrected. OBS was only outputting 1 audio channel, so everything is copacetic now. I have 1 hour and 45 minutes of edited content with no audio. Like I said, that's just the edited stuff. But, you know, I'm playing on the second highest difficulty, so I'm pretty much getting my butt kicked. So thankfully a lot of that content that I cut out was just repeated deaths and nothing crucial. But I do feel like difficulty is scaled higher in God of War Ragnarok compared to 2018. So to me, the second highest difficulty in Ragnarok feels like the highest difficulty in 2018 God of War. But like I said earlier, after episode 20, audio will resume. I still got to fill commentary for these 3 episodes so that it's not totally dead silent. And thank you for being patient, guys. For real. Stick with me as I'm figuring everything out. We'll be back on track and outputting quality content again, and that'll be easier for me to produce than it was previously. Also, there is some content that's going to be missing later on down the line, because in my other misadventures with OBS, at one point it changed the source, the recording source, to a resolution and that's way beyond what I actually capture, record, or display in. So the rendered video ended up looking like a mess. It was rendering at like a frame a second. Unfortunately, same thing happened with Diablo. I was trying to record Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred content, and ultimately had to abandon that project because the first 3 hours of the story were all recorded in this weird 40-something resolution, and everything looked terrible when I played it back, and I have no way of going back and recovering that without playing Vessel of Hatred on a different character. So I just gave up on recording Vessel of Hatred, so unfortunately I will not be sharing that. But let's finally talk the game. You know, it only took half an hour to get here. That was a lot. But a lot's been going on in the background. And again, I thank everyone who's still here. And thank everyone for passing by, for giving me a shot. The game plays great on PC. Even on Linux, as you can see here. I'm playing the game on ultra settings with AMD FSR3.1 and AMD frame generation. The game is Steam Deck verified, which means it should run on a Linux desktop with the same expected quality. Which is another good thing about the Steam Deck, being that it's Linux based. If Valve can incentivize developers to support Linux gaming for the deck, then Linux gaming as a whole benefits. The only weird thing about playing on a Linux desktop is you have to use what are known as launch arguments to tell Steam you're on a Steam Deck. I'm going to get a little technical for a second. Playing Windows games on a Linux system for a long time has been done with a compatibility tool called Wine, and Wine does some great things. Valve made their own fork of Wine called Proton, and so many Windows games run on Linux in Steam by using Proton to translate calls for DirectX into calls for Vulkan. If it's confusing, I'm sorry. I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. The same guy who maintains my Linux distro writes custom Proton tools for Linux as well. His GE Proton's latest releases 14 and 15 include the Steam Deck argument for you, so if you just use GE 914 or 915, it will run as expected on Steam Deck. So I am running GOWR Ragnarok with GE Proton 915, as well as using what's called Game Scope. Think of it as game mode on your TV to allow me to play HDR. This, combined with FSR and frame generation, allows me to hit targets of 240 frames a second and beyond while playing at ultra settings and 1440p resolution. If there's a lot going on, then the game might drop into the mid 150s, but usually it stays in the steady 200 plus range. The ray tracing and other visual effects are pretty good, and aside from the usual visual artifacts you might see when translating DirectX to Vulkan, there's no degradation of quality. I chose a 1440 display over a 4K display because right now 4K is pretty much locked at 60 frames a second. There are displays available that'll get you into the 120 FPS territory, but those are still pretty expensive. And 1440, which is also known as 2.5K or Quad HD or QHD, might not have as many pixels per square inch as 4K, but it still looks damn better than 1080, and displays that go above and beyond 124 FPS are available in 1440. So it's a best of the both worlds situation, really. I have a 27-inch Alienware monitor with a screen resolution of 2560 by 1440 and 240 hertz. And I paid less for that than what Sony is going to ask you to pay for the PS5 Pro. Burn. I went there. Anyway, I'm really enjoying Ragnarok so far. It picks up the story right where 2018 left off, and it doesn't miss a beat. Like, I have been hyped about Fimbulwinter and Ragnarok since the end of the last game. Like, I want to know more about Loki and Odin and all that jazz. And it's a great story, and I might have to emulate the original games because I've never played them, but I love these two that I have played. And I think the original God of War series was PS3, and we previously discussed I jumped shift after a PS2, but my wife still has a PS3 laying around here somewhere, I'm sure, and I can use it to dump the files. I have found the games cheap, or dump the files if I found the games cheap online somewhere. I might look into that. I already have the software. I would just need the files. I'm on edge right now, though. I'm telling you. Like, I don't know how things are going to play out with Kratos and Atreus. I know this franchise has been going on for a long time, but I can't really see them offing Kratos, even if they want you to think it's going that way. I don't think he's done, but maybe I'm wrong. I know the game's been out on PS for a while, so it's all out there, but I've managed to go this long without spoiling it for myself, so we'll see where it goes. even without the past games to draw from. I mean, I know the story about his family and how it drove him to burn Olympus down, but I just, having participated in these last 2 games, it's been a very compelling story, and I got to take my hat off to Sony on this one. This is a great story, and the game has delivered a great cinematic experience so far, and I'm really excited to be along for the ride. But even other Sony games I've played on PC have been great. I've played both Horizons, Spider-Man, and Miles Morales, Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, God of War 2018, and they've all been great. And I created a PS account just to get some extra skins in whichever Spider-Man game it was, Miles, I think. And I am excited for the next Spider-Man and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth when those get to PC. Although, no lies, Rebirth has actually almost made me consider actually using our PS5 to play it now rather than waiting, because I love Final Fantasy VII. I am super spoiled on PC, though. Not gonna lie. I love being able to play games at crazy high refresh rates and with the graphics all the way up. Like, you just have to experience it to understand it. I used to be fully content with hitting 60 frames a second, but not anymore, especially on this rig. If performance dips below 100 frames a second, I throw a fit. Like, legit, no lie. I don't even really like it when it falls below 120, to be honest with you. I got the OLED deck when that dropped too, so even on there, it's like 60 is bare bones. It can go up to 90 on the OLED, and I like to stay up in the highs when I can, but 60 is still okay there. But anything less than 60 is nah. And mods are cool. I like mods. And unlike console, there are methods to mod games without negating achievements or trophies if that's your thing. I promise y'all, I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm just super stoked about PC gaming. And I'm just trying to share my excitement. Like I said before, it's a choice. You do you, and I'll do me. But thank you for sharing my experience by being here, and I really appreciate you. I really do. All I can really say about this situation, though, is I'm glad I play with subtitles, because that way you can at least follow the story through those bits, rather than just completely not having any idea what's going on. But man, I wish I'd caught this sooner, because there are some funny lines in here that you just do not get to hear at all. They'll only be captured through subtitles. Like there's a little bit about a juicy Nokin that's just hilarious. But I do love the combat in this game, in God of War in general, really. It just feels so visceral and so good. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I don't know how else to describe it. It's brutal. It's bone crushing. It's hard. It's bloody. It's gritty. It is Spartan combat at its finest. The quality in the visuals and the story elements are equally matched by the brutal pacing of the combat. I love watching the combat evolve as you unlock new abilities as well. Like, it's really cool. And I also like how they reintroduce the familiar mechanics from the previous game. Pardon me, sorry. But reintroduce familiar mechanics from the previous game, but without making it feel tired or recycled. And I like finding the drops in the water, or the little portals that summon the super high level enemies for you to kill to close them. It's all great, it's all familiar, and yet it's so fresh. This might just be the FromSoft experience in me, but I like that the combat punishes you for not paying attention to. Like when you encounter a boss fight that focuses on a mechanic you've been using the whole way there, and you have to pay attention to that and utilize it at the appropriate time, and trying to resist will ultimately lead to failure, at least at the higher difficulties. I also enjoy the way that it incorporates puzzles into the gameplay. Like, I remember old school OG Resident Evil and Silent Hill, and how they were riddled with puzzles, and it was a great mechanic in addition to the fighting and running, and it was a good way to change the pace of the game. And I'll have to admit that there have been one or two puzzles that have stumped me to where I had to pause and check for a solution. But for the most part, they have been just challenging enough that with enough time I can work them out. So that's really good. Balancing puzzles is tricky because you do want them to be solvable, but not too easy. Outside of this game specifically, I am excited because once I can figure all this out, I look forward to doing more content. The last major hurdle being figuring out how to balance audio and Audacity so I don't have to sit so far away from the microphone with the volume on, the mic itself turned all the way down to keep it from blasting everybody's ears out. It's trial by fire. Like I said, I got forced into working audio into the mix ahead of when I was ready to work on that. So I'm hoping that by the time I get this audio recorded, I can at least have it balanced well enough that it's not annoyingly loud. I'd rather y'all maybe have to put up the volume because I went too far the other way than blast your eardrums out. The other bummer is that while I'm going to keep making time to edit and record at my backlog, I have to slow uploads until I get through this hurdle. Because like I said, I can't really just upload it because it's an hour and a half of footage that has no sound, and at the same time I can't expect anyone to sit through an hour and a half of content with zero kind of audio. So I guess I'm learning how to mix commentary on the new setup. Before I could record audio directly in Premiere Pro and edit it in tandem with the video, this is my first time having to use different software for recording, editing, and audio. I could record my audio live in OBS at the same time as gameplay, but I've tried that before and it does not work so well because I get too focused on the game and I don't talk enough, if at all, while I'm playing. It's just easier for me to capture gameplay and commentary separately so that I can provide quality, thought-out commentary along with the content. Anyway, once it's all ironed out and I have a handle on it all, I'm going to try and work out a regular update schedule to actually start updating more regular content again. I can say I am starting to understand why a lot of content creators are also on PC, because it's just so much easier to have OBS on your desktop, capturing your screen without having to mess with capture cards and all that junk. That and being able to edit everything on the same machine and handle all the production and whatnot in one spot instead of having to incorporate a bunch of different devices and peripherals and all that nonsense that goes into capturing content on console. Again, no console hate. It's just easier to produce content from a desktop. As far as upcoming stuff goes, I do have Vessel of Hatred already by the time I'm recording this, Vessel of Hatred's already out, so I'm going to revise this part of the script on the fly. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the Vessel of Hatred is out. I was planning to record content for that, but OBS was OBS, and totally borked out the good first 3 hours of the campaign on that, and recapturing that's pretty much not possible without going to another character. So that's not happening anymore, unfortunately. But Vessel of Hatred's good content, so if you haven't played it yet, I recommend it. There is a free update coming down the line for Dead Island 2, and my wife and I both play the Dead Island games together. That's one of the games we enjoy sharing, so we'll definitely be playing some of that, and I'll probably try to record some of that for the channel as well. But I don't really have anything else I'm planning on buying right now. It's the holidays, so it's kind of time to start tightening up on some of that stuff. But I do have a few other upcomings on my list, like Silent Hill 2, which is already out. I'm just waiting on a sale. Mortal Kombat 1 recently had another expansion release. I'm just waiting for that to go on sale. I'm still waiting for Shadow of the Erd Tree to go on sale. So there are some things there that I could potentially line up for future content. Last month, they released Endless Moto mode for Ghost Runner 2, and I've played a little bit of that, and it's fun, but I'm not very good at it, so I don't know that I'll be recording any of it for content for the channel, just because it would pretty much just be a fail compilation. If there's anything I do excel at in Endless Moto, it's burning out the motorbike and failing. But Ghost Runner is a great series. I do love it. Let's see here. But, there's also a lot of good classics in my library that I rebought on Steam from my earlier Xbox days, and I've got a lot of stuff that came in from Honda Bundle sales and whatnot. So I'm sure we can find something to play for you too. Sorry. Maybe someday I'll play around with the idea of streaming again, but since I can do that through OBS2. But right now I have no plans to stream, and am fully committed to just doing videos on demand on YouTube.